Babel says the descendants of Noah built a tower at Babel. It was to reach up to heaven and make them famous. Angered by their ambition, God afflicted them with the curse of different languages and denied their common tool of communication. All construction ceased. Today, language is still an affliction for many. To be a Greek, Arabic or Chinese speaker is to be denied the same access to rise in an English-speaking society. For English, the common tool of communication here, remains the most powerful and guarded possession, even in this multicultural society.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka
Rula Ali is Australian, a Muslim of Lebanese background. She lives in Tempe, a depressed suburb of Sydney. Outwardly, she has much against her: gender, race and religion. Like millions of Australians every day, she reconciles two different cultures. But one does not properly reconcile her. It's 21 years since Australia officially became a multicultural society. The battle for racial equality still has a long way to go. But it's a battle now closely studied by a world seeking ways to live with increasing ethnic contact and conflict. Tempe, next to Sydney Airport, with one of the most diverse migrant communities imaginable. And for generations, it's been a trap of poverty, cheap labour and social neglect. Today, it's Australia's newest international attraction.
In my view, the economies, the Western economies, the technologically advanced economies, so-called, have as their only productive resource for the next century, certainly the next few decades, the resources of multiculturalism.
We must understand the importance of the multiculturalism, because this is a policy to reconcile these ethnic and nationalist conflicts.
I think there are some extraordinarily important lessons to be learned from Australian society. One lesson that I hope we'll be learning in the future is how it is what it's like to be living at peace, you know.
Rula Ali's school, Tempe High, is defying language as a curse. It is giving all of its students the power to communicate and progress against every conceivable obstacle to learning.
It's an interesting area. If you like, it's always been a migrant centre around town.
With the nature of the migrants changing over the years.
Precisely, yeah. It was.
Courtney Kasdan, Professor of Education from Harvard University. She's going to Tempe High to investigate a revolution in learning that goes far beyond the classroom. She is one of the growing number of international experts who are now looking to Australia's unique migrant experience.
Which tone is that? 4. Listen. Listen and look here. Woo, woo, woo.
This is still all Sydney.
Oh yes, yeah.
Miền Trung ở đây á, nó chỉ có hai con sông chính thôi, sông Mã và sông Cả. Như vậy thì sông Mã thì nó.
I chose Tempe. I always believe in showing people things warts and all. I don't believe I could have taken her to a wonderful school where everything went beautifully, or the kids were no problem and things like that. Tempe is not like that. Society traditionally has treated places like Tempe as the dustbin and offered very little for these students, and we have to do something to change that.
Có thể nhiều bằng miền Nam. Ngoài sông ngòi ra đó.
Robert Field works with a government agency supporting Australia's poorest schools. The Disadvantaged Schools Programme, DSP, is developing a radical English teaching programme. School principal Peter James has added his own innovation that makes Tempe unlike any other school in Australia.
And have you been around this part of Sydney before? It's
No,
not
no.
normally a tourist area.
No, so I'm delighted to get out of the tourist area. What should I know that's special about the school?
There's about 17% of the children are from an English-speaking background, and that in itself is unusual. 17.
17.
And that's from mixed areas.
1783, yeah.
There's roughly 17. It's about 0.1% less actually that are from Macedonian background, and then there's about 16% Greek, 13.5–14% Arabic speaking, 12% Vietnamese, and then we drop down to a whole range of 6% of Chinese, Portuguese, Pacific Islanders, and a range of others.
Kasdan seeks ways to teach non-English-speaking Americans in that increasingly polarised society. When Peter James came to Tempe 7 years ago, it was bottom of the pile on just about every social indicator. With all their different languages, its students were seen as beyond educated. James had to find a way to overcome entrenched outside prejudice and ethnic rivalries to realise the goal of English. The first, crucial step to enter mainstream Australian society. Between Veal and James, Tempe students are achieving the most unexpected results.
Characters, good. Incidents, good, who?
English for new migrants to Australia is perhaps the most important thing. I wouldn't discount the benefits of having some family around them and that sort of emotional security, but without it you're locked out of this society and you can never fully participate as an adult.
Plot, good. Two people saying that. I want you to find as many of these types of words in this review and underline them for me. All right? So go through with a ruler, a pencil or a pen or a highlighter if you have one of those. Just go through it quickly and find as many as you can, and then in about a minute or so you can share with your partner or in your group and see if you've missed any.
Okay, now what's she going on to?
Language is a very powerful tool in opening up choices for people. I think that's a fundamental issue. It's a primary reason why some people get ahead and others don't.
Just write that down and I'll explain that a bit further to you.
It can be make or break for these students in something as simple as the Year 10 reference test.
Just have a look at this. I'm going to ask you in a minute a question about this book.
The outcome of that approach to education, the traditional approach, was that a vast majority of students were simply disenfranchised from the educational system.
Right, Milliam, would you like to read this book? Why not? This review says this book is terrific. Why don't you want to read it?
Because it's too long.
It's too long.
And today we are going to discuss sport. I'm going to ask you whether you like sport, which is your favorite sport, whether you have represented the school in that particular sport, and what were your results. So first of all, a big heading. الرياضة المدرسية, sport at school.
But this is not simply a story of assimilation into the dominant culture. A dream that has tragically failed in America. At Tempe, the road to English is different.
Γυρίζει απότομα προς αυτήν.
Υπερβολικός λέει, $300, άγνωστος αποστελέας και υπερβολικός λέει.
Okay, Mina, could you please read the top of page 29, the brackets?
Χτυπάει η πόρτα. Ο μάθος κάθεται. Η φύσα πανικοβάλλεται.
I remember being concerned at a member of staff making a comment that we educated children to be illiterate in more than one language. Now, this was initially a backhanded swat at English, but at the fact that many of the people weren't very good in their first language anyway. And as I thought, the way I thought about that was that the kids aren't too bad because they are at least bilingual and many of them are polylingual. And maybe we should look at that as a positive attribute.
ما هي الرياضة التي تحبين لعبها؟ ما هي رياضتك المفضلة؟
رياضتي المفضلة لعب السكر.
كرة القدم. ولماذا تحبين هذه الرياضة؟
We've got a number of programs in here for improving English. And as we start to think about languages, mainly to turn a negative into a plus, someone on the language staff said to me, there is research that says if you get your first language well learnt, then your second language comes far more easily. And in fact, that maybe you can't learn a second language until you're proficient in your first language. I didn't come here to set up a languages school. I came here to be principal of a comprehensive high school. And what's happened has happened as a result of this environment.
You get better at English if you keep on talking your language. Like it does. It helps you. Like if you talk Lebanese, okay, and Arabic, and you're working Arabic, and then if you're good at Arabic, then you'll be good at English. That's what's happening now.
Each Arabic new word that they learn, with the translation that they have to do, they learn the equivalent of that word in English. So their vocabulary in English increases. By the same token, their Arabic, is getting better also all the time. So while they're improving their Arabic, they're improving their English as well.
Daring to do the opposite of what logic and the authorities dictated, James found languages weren't a curse, but a cure. And he went further.
I wondered how you saw the relationship between what was going on in the English classes, such as we just saw this morning, and the very interesting work being done here in the teaching of the home languages.
When I looked at what was happening in English, where we weren't performing very well 7 years ago, and the construction of the curriculum to fit in this large amount of English that they were doing wasn't administratively very sound either. So I reduced the amount of English taught in English classes, cut approximately 16% off.
16% less time in English.
And that time redistributed to other places where English is used, but not in the English classroom. And part of that went into the community languages, which we built up from Greek only to the 8 languages that we're, or the 5 community languages we're running now. And we believe, and the evidence we've got, is that there has been a steady improvement in English over the last 4 or 5 years. And if it keeps going at that rate, we are very close. Last year, but for 13 or 14 children out of 130, we would have been at the state average in all of our English results in the high school certificate. There was one group that didn't make that. They were about 2 or 3 points below. But it's so close, and so many of them, with only a year or so in this country, coming from non-English speaking background, we're quite thrilled with the progress.
That's really remarkable.
Almost half of all Australians are from a non-English speaking background. No other nation has received so many migrants with so many cultures, languages and religions in such a brief span of time. And this, just 21 years after a racist white Australia policy was replaced by one of multiculturalism. Many Australians, though, still feel migrants should abandon their cultures to assimilate. The paradox of Tempe is a graphic demonstration that difference can promote social cohesion.
Now, on any common sense understanding of education, it would seem crazy to reduce the time of the English curriculum in a school that's 83%, I think he said, non-English speaking students. And yet, the factual result, evidently, is improved English achievement, as well as what the students are getting in a way of more advanced intellectual development of their home languages, orally and in writing. But as I say, it's still a controversial question.
Le glacier Belle Hélène, un café-restaurant. Alors Marc, t'es Claude, Raja, la serveuse.
Bonjour, monsieur, vous désolé.
Vous faites des sandwichs?
Oui, monsieur. Alors, c'est ça. C'est tout. Merci. On va lire maintenant. Raja, tu vas lire.
I didn't realise what I was coming into. I had no idea because I'm used to working in a small department where you've got maybe 3 languages working. The number of kids doing languages maybe about, if you're lucky, about 25% of the school. Then here it's right across the curriculum. There's a whole school interest in the study of languages, and so that's very different. The amount of languages, 8, is very different. There are 8 languages teachers here.
Arabic, Chinese, French, Greek, Italian, Japanese, Macedonian, Vietnamese. More than any other state school, and not without opposition.
Ah, sì, grazie Angela. E la camicetta bianca, dov'è?
It's not unusual to teach a community language or to teach a foreign language in an Australian school, but to see it as a resource for learning English is unusual, and it's a brave step. I don't know of any other school in Sydney that's doing it to the extent that Tempe is here, and that is doing it consciously.
But he keeps doing it. He keeps banging his head against a brick wall. Like, we have some impossible thing, what would seem to be impossible in this school. We've got a maths teacher who can teach Japanese. Why? Because Peter kept banging his head against the wall and said, I don't need a full maths teacher, but geez, I'd love a maths teacher who could teach some language. And we got a maths teacher who could teach Japanese. I don't need a full economics and business studies and legal studies teacher, but geez, I'd love someone in that area who could teach Chinese. Bang your head at the wall long enough, we've got it.
He took a risk. He sure did take a risk. We didn't ask him what made him think that it was a risk that might well pay off. And what in his background as an ex-chemistry teacher, I mean, he wasn't a Greek teacher or an Italian teacher. He's a chemistry teacher. But, you know, what made him think that in this school at this time that was a risk that was likely to pay off?
Faced with an education system which took little account of Australia's cultural differences, James had to abandon existing practices if he was ever to give them the means to survive.
You all right?
Yep. Thank you, sir.
Good on you.
You see, like, all the high positions now, they're all, like, they employ all the Anglos, and you see most of the ethnics, all like the Greek, the Arabic, they're all working most probably in factories or something. It's probably because they don't have an education like the Anglo people, and they probably give, like, Australia probably gives more recognition to the Anglos when it comes to employment than other multicultural backgrounds.
I want to be a hostess, and that's why it's good to know second language for a hostess. I'm going to be famous one day.
Yes, I think there is an incumbent responsibility on governments that recruit immigrants to provide them the tools, those are linguistic and other tools, to progress socially in a way that their individual merits would permit. And I think that's the sort of society that we're evolving, one that is broadly individualistic in that merit and outcome ought to depend on that, but no one ought to be disadvantaged on the basis of their membership of any group.
I have seen places where language is considered to be for the elite, and that was not what was in my mind, that the idea that everyone here, over 80%, have got a second language. Can we use this as a plus for them and the school?
Tempe, the languages staff are, for the first time, building a sense of pride and self-worth in their students.
Yeah, about 10, yeah, I've got some kids in year 10, they can probably train the little ones.
When I first started here, the Macedonian kids were sort of ashamed of being wogs or called wogs, or they didn't even want to study their own language because they thought they would be called wogs. But then they got used to it, and now I can say that after 5 years of myself being here, they've been really good. They're so proud of themselves.
And when I came here, there's so many different people, because I always thought that people never accepted me when I was in primary school. And the thing is, I was always trying to figure out what I was doing wrong and why they didn't really accept you. And then it was because you're from European background. And I came here and it was absolutely fantastic.
I want to learn English and Vietnamese at the same time, so I can speak and both languages at the same time. When I was in Canterbury, because I got a problem with communicating with Vietnamese people. That one.
And at Tempe?
At Tempe, I feel very free to speak Vietnamese, but also English as well. Yeah.
I think he would have found it very, very hard to convince people of how important languages are and the study of languages are, particularly for kids like this. And to see their self-esteem is really quite incredible. I mean, he's done the right thing by these kids.
Yeah, I was told, I was once walking around the houses and I was told, I was selling tickets for the football club, and he goes, which school do you go to? I go to him, I go to Tempe. Go to Tempe, and he goes to me, oh, isn't that the school where they send rejects from other countries? And I go, can you just tell me what you mean? And he goes to me, well, you see, a long time ago, they used to send people there from other countries who didn't know how to speak English good. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. He goes to me, there used to be big fights all the time. He goes to me, how's it going now? And I said, oh, well, no problem at all. Everybody's getting along fine, no fights. He goes, everybody's considered the same. And you get some of the really top students, going top 1,000 students, coming from our school, a few of them. And things like that, we're doing great now. And he couldn't believe it. He goes to me, has it that much improved? I go, yeah. Well, it's just working out fine.
Experiencing the year 12 losers, year 11 rule.
You haven't got a class? I haven't got my social with no shoes. I gave the history staff room and asked. Jerry, that comes back again.
Out of its setbacks, Tempe has touched on what a truly multicultural country could be. Maligned at home, Sydney's vast urban sprawl is a natural laboratory, creating new patterns of coexistence. What is scorned as our weak sense of national identity here is seen as a positive asset in more troubled countries. Israel, a young migrant society similar to Australia, at least in human statistics. Professor Deborah Callaghan-Fishman of Haifa University turned to Australia to find a solution to her country's deep social inequalities between Jews and Arabs and the rising ethnic tensions between rival Jewish migrant groups.
First of all, read in English the first paragraph of the article and then translate it into Hebrew. And we'll talk a little bit about the dilemmas she faced, the problems she faced in translating.
Because of this constant striving for a purely Israeli culture, there seems to be something unwieldy about having people who come from different countries who have no alternative but to bring with them their own cultures. And they always are interpreted as a kind of threat to what has been established so far. That, I think, is quite different from what happens in Australia.
The explanation for the way
Callaghan Fishman is using another Australian teaching innovation called social literacy. It focuses on respect for human differences across the full spectrum of learning. At Haifa, Callaghan Fishman has adapted its techniques to train teachers of English working in Hebrew and Arabic schools.
This course was unique, even at the university, where there are workshops, and it was the first time that mixed teams of Arab and Jewish student teachers were formed all together in the country, as far as I know.
In the future, if he learn craft, he will help him in the future to make new things.
You should be so happy and excited to marry a friend.
We are teaching English as an international language. We're not teaching Anglo culture. The use of this kind of material cuts across all the differences among our students. Most of my teaching centers on the importance of culture in shaping the individual, the importance of multiculturalism in Israeli society. At any rate, I'm trying to convince Israeli students of education that Israel is a plural society. It's not a society that one can define in a single direction as being completely of one kind or another.
That's war something. War I say later. Mama, schwor ni hao. Okay, that's good. May schwor.
Having that now, all right? Year 11 break. Thank you.
But could Australia be storing up future ethnic conflict by encouraging cultural difference?
Just keep reading. I'm just going to write the name of the play on the blackboard.
Tempe's experiment was tested with the breakup of Yugoslavia. Relations between the suburb's two largest groups, Greek and Macedonian, flared when the former Yugoslavian state of Macedonia declared itself a republic.
Again, when I first came here, members of the Macedonian community continually asked me why you had to learn Greek. My history wasn't as good in that area as it is now, and I did a little bit of research and discovered that there had been some contention about Greece and Macedonia, and that this goes back for 1,000 odd years or more.
Parents can cling fiercely to their cultures and rivalries, but their children see their own identity differently. Pressures of an older generation are being challenged.
Even though we are learning within the school, especially at Tempe, because it's so multicultural, even though we are learning to respect different cultures, it does not necessarily mean that our parents' beliefs will let us expand on what we are learning. Like, I'm a dancer myself, and I have
I've tried so many times to try and get to different style of dancing, like Spanish, and your parents are like, no, you can't do that.
As Mona said, they tend to tell you to stick to your own culture. Also the Australian, of course, but like they don't like urge you to mix in with other nationalities, like their dances or stuff. Like they sort of tell you you have to go to Macedonian, like dances, discos, stuff like that. But they don't really urge you to go on and mix in with other nationalities.
My parents' philosophy of life is, no matter on what issue, try and learn all you can and be like a sponge and take it in.
Like about exactly the same, okay? My family, there's exactly the same, but...
And I think it's very contradicting if our parents were to turn around and tell us, don't you dare mix in with, say, another culture.
You can't come. Whatever nationality we are, right, our parents always tell us, learn Greek, example Greek, go to Greek school, listen to Greek music, read the Greek paper, always, you know, not to make us lose our identity, right? We accept that, but by doing that, they really push us and they really try to make, like, the Greek identity, like, superior to other races. And, like, some Greeks, I mean, I'm not stereotyping all Greeks, I'm just saying some...
That's what you're doing now, you're stereotyping. That's wrong.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, some Greek parents, or any, like, Macedonian parents or whatever, each nationality will have its own people who really push it. Like to say that, you know, you're not supposed to lose it, we understand you're not supposed to lose your original identity, but not try to make it superior to the Australian identity or to English identity. See, some parents don't want us to, I'm just saying some parents, I mean, don't want us to really, like, accept other nationalities. And we're, see, our generation today, we're much more easier to accept that.
We have to bridge, like, we have to make our parents, or the people who influence us to upkeep our culture, make them aware that there are other cultures around. They are aware of it, but many of them do not really want to follow up on it.
Over the past couple of years, I've had 4 people teaching Greek and 2 people teaching Macedonian. And I don't think it's always been easy for those 6 people, but they have managed to live in the one room professionally and to work within the school.
Greek and Macedonian teachers, Irene Zenos and Biliana Bozinovska, have been a great influence on their students.
It's composition writing, it's for occupation, so when you do your unit on occupations. There's nothing there. Yeah, Elvis Presley revisited. Yeah.
No, thanks.
We do similar units of work, so if I'm doing something on animals and I find something that's great, Billy will take it and then transfer it into Macedonian. We do that fairly regularly. It's the only way to survive when you're teaching a community language, you have to share.
Yeah.
The community languages staff have had to create their own teaching materials from scratch, a time-consuming task showing one of the school's few computers. Yet they are influencing a whole education system. Their work is highly sought after as other schools start to follow Tempe's teaching experiment.
That's nice.
When people ask me, what do we do about multiculturalism, what approach have we got, what is this secret or that secret, I have great difficulty answering it because to me it's an attitude and we just live it here every day.
Just to share between 2, okay?
As we eye an economic future in Asia, Japanese is now Australia's most widely taught school language.
Elena-san, hi. Can you read what the twins are saying?
Ohio, so listen, Robertson, can you read what Hosakun is saying?
Ohio, sumimasen, onemura, onomaiwa.
But why is the super economy Japan quietly studying us and all that is happening here? Even Japan, with its image as the strictest monoculture on Earth, is having to face change. Professor Masime Sekine of Tokyo's Keio University was sent to Australia by the Japanese government to find solutions to a political and economic dilemma.
The reason why the Japanese government decided to study Australia is very simple, because Australia had the White Australia policy. Australia was formerly a homogeneous country, but actually they had many culturally different people. But this situation is very similar to Japanese at this moment. So the Japanese government is very interested in the change from homogeneous country to heterogeneous countries.
Demands for equal rights by badly treated Chinese and Korean workers, a mainstay of the economy, is forcing Japan to examine the reality of multiracial society and its dealings in a changing world.
I think we must understand the true nature of multicultural society, because at the moment every society is becoming a multicultural society, because there are many migrants and refugees and foreign guest workers. They are moving all over the world every year. And even Japan accepts 1 million, more than 1 million foreign residents here. So every society now should try to understand this changing aspect of the world.
Sekine wrote a series of confidential reports on the changes of immigration policies and attitudes in Australia. And he wrote this book, Multicultural Australia.
Yes, at the moment, in my opinion, I think Australian multiculturalism is the best policies around the world, and it is very successful.
I think that in Australia we've developed these policies at a remarkably important time, because what we're finding on an international scale is that interdependent economies have made it possible for there to be the greatest mobility of labour of any historical period, of movement of students, and recruitment of labour. Japan, for example, has a very low fertility rate, an enormous demand for labour and an increasing demand for labour, and they recruit their workers from Bangladesh and Pakistan and the Philippines and other countries.
Multiculturalism has become big business. 21 years on, it has a profit motive: how to exploit our cultural habits, once laughed at, to win new markets at home and overseas. Will the money ever come back to Tempe and 1,000 other communities where the real breakthroughs are being made? At Tempe, the daily battle is still to give the kids the means to compete on equal terms for higher education and jobs.
Hello, English? No, she's gone to class, I think. You want me to take a message? Poseidon, what are you doing next period with year 11?
Othello. I'm sort of about halfway through.
Othello with them?
Yeah.
They're liking it?
Yeah, they're enjoying it.
Yeah.
It's their, one of the, for a lot of them, it's their first attempt at Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And they seem to be really enjoying it. That we have been consistently at the HSC above the state average, in English. And for a school like ours, with you know, the majority coming from, you know, English as second language sort of thing, it is really an accolade that we're very proud of. For instance, Chaucer had, you know, was lying in the book room for several years, and I just felt I had to do something about it, and I thought I'd introduce it, so we did The Partner's Tale.
So we're looking at a very important scene in Lord of the Flies. This is the scene where Piggy's killed. And we're going to study, the symbolism in this passage. We're going to look at the messages that Golding, the author Golding, is trying to put across. If you can understand...
Tempe uses a special approach to English teaching called genre, an Australian innovation being developed by the Disadvantaged Schools program.
Really good essays in the senior school. So let's look at this, and then we'll do some preparation for an interpretation. Someone want to volunteer to read? The genre approach is trying to make the invisible rules of English visible for disadvantaged kids. People who aren't disadvantaged, that is, they grow up with English-speaking backgrounds and middle-class homes where issues are discussed, and they learn the genre by osmosis. They do a lot of reading, they do a lot of discussion, and they're exposed to a wide range of reading materials, all of it in English, and they learn how to construct an argument without ever being told. They learn the rules because they're exposed to it so much. But disadvantaged kids are disadvantaged in that way. They don't have these materials, and so what we do is make these rules visible to them. They don't know what's wrong with their writing, but they know they're not getting the marks. They know that they're not persuasive as speakers. And so the genre approach just tells kids, listen, there are rules governing these things.
It's so low. Last time my ear was ringing for 2 days. Maybe I should go home and you can.
All right, now just stop there, that expression, my ears were ringing. What does it mean? Does anybody know?
Because he wearing the earring.
No, he's not wearing earrings.
No.
Okay. No. Where are they? They're in a pub, aren't they? And
Each lesson tests new DSP materials, and the student's role is vital.
Noise. The noise. What happens to your ears if you go somewhere and there's very loud music playing? What happens? Maybe even for a few hours after.
The most important impact of the genre approach and the work we've been doing that is to get some success for these kids.
Who gets Wendy?
Win and have success in the mainstream game. So no excuses, we're going to take you on, we're going to take your system on, and we are going to do it. And we're starting to see some really good results coming out of our kids. We're starting to see a Tempe student who gets a commendation in the Sydney Morning Herald short story competition. We can't say we're beating you at your own game, but we're starting to have success there now.
But that's just what they are doing, beating the old establishment at their own linguistic game. As English standards are generally said to be falling, Sydney's most exclusive schools are turning to the DSP genre program to learn the lessons of English discovered in places like Tempe.
Seen that students in schools in the DSP have improved dramatically their marks simply through being explicit about language, through following a genre-based approach. And indeed, one of the ironies is that several private schools in Sydney, the Scots College I could name as one, have actually become quite interested in the approach for their own students because they can see that it's effective and it's doing something. So, I mean, I think it's a wonderful turning of the tables when the elite in our society look to what's happening in the disadvantaged schools program for a lead.
Okay. Who's the right today? Mark it all quickly. Bashar.
Not only wealthy schools benefit from their endeavours. So successful is this classroom collaboration that Australia's genre program has become a multicultural export, sold to 9 countries by the DSP.
Can we get ready, please, Bashar? Okay. We stop at page 74, which is on my book. Now, as we know, the problem 106 of the other one.
In language education, ironically, well, in fact not ironically at all, Australia leads the world, and it's now countries such as the United States and Great Britain which actually look to work in Australia and to look to work that's happening in schools like Tempe for the lead.
But with English comes power and a political outcry. In Britain, like the United States, there is government opposition to migrant education programs that are somehow seen as a threat to English-speaking society.
Australia, I think, is looked to as a place where possible ways of handling the future are actually being worked out, whereas at the moment Britain is not a place where possible ways of handling positive futures can emerge. There's a lot of interest in the genre project in England. And some 2 years ago, the English government funded a project to develop language awareness in the schools. It was the Language in the National Curriculum Project, the LINC project for short. It funded it to the tune of £23 million.
Okay, now, in the next column, with a paragraph that starts viciously.
The LINC project originated with a wish by Mrs. Thatcher when she was Prime Minister, I think in 1987 or 1988, to reaffirm the status of English as the language of England or of Britain, the dominant language, the language through which all the groups in Britain would be unified. What the LINC program came up with was a statement that said, many languages are spoken in Britain. English is spoken in very many different forms. We should pay attention to these factors in the English curriculum. This proved to be a highly contentious, subversive point, and consequently the program has been, well, in effect banned. £23 million down the drain.
Now, the hangman is actually the person who puts the noose around the condemned person's neck. The hangman, in the olden days, actually, maybe they still do it, the hangman wears a mask so that his face can't be seen because what he's doing is so horrible.
There is tremendous resistance at all levels of bureaucracy and of the political system to opening up issues of language. Tremendous pressure to keep it invisible, to keep it under wraps, if you like, to make it a non-issue. Why? Because I think it's dangerous. I think if you are giving students access to powerful ways of making meaning, you're actually threatening the status quo. You're asking students to question. You're encouraging them to challenge.
This is an English-speaking country, and all of the power games are in English. So if they're going to take on being a powerful person in the mainstream, and one of the things that I remember getting a big smile at a school assembly a couple of years ago when I was praising someone that I was looking forward to our first Prime Minister. And it occurred to me, no one here has really thought about the fact that they should be Prime Minister. And that's something that we need to work towards in this taking power, taking on the future. This empowering is to be a political person.
And my question again is, what is the dramatic importance of Bianca's entry?
Where Iago plotted to get the handkerchief and give it to Cassio and hope he was seen with it. And now she's entered and she's found him with his handkerchief and she's asking who it is, who owns it.
It doesn't answer my question. My question being dramatic importance, right? So, what is the emotion or the state of the people, the way the people are feeling at that point?
So, could Bianca sort of like jeopardise Iago's plans? Because now he told Othello that Cassio is having an affair with Desdemona. Now Bianca turns up, and if Othello finds out that them two...
That's right.
What did the ancients do to have the power of communication taken away?
The story of Babel is a story of ambition and the punishment of ambition. It's an ambition to be more than one ought to be. It's about time we turned the story of Babel on its head and said that the fragmentation of languages is now, at the end of the second millennium after Christ, the only productive resource that we can carry forward into the next millennium.
In New South Wales, the state government is cutting education spending. Continued access for disadvantaged schools to their own language program is in question.
Our planning for 1994 has started. Some of the stuff that's been said at this stage, there is no intention, nor is there any plan or anything else to change the targeted schools, to change the amount of money, but there is a plan to try and put more money directly into schools. And that seems to be the argument behind some of the variations that are underway at the moment. It could mean that there'd be less consultants employed full-time. It could mean that schools have money to employ the consultants that they choose. We're led to believe that staffing will be tight for 1994 and that...
Both personally and professionally, I'd be devastated if the program would change. Personally, because I've seen for myself the difference it can make. Professionally, because I just think simply it's the best thing we've got in the world in language education. To cut back now, when we're on the brink of success and change, wholesale change, large-scale change in the way that we think about language education would be disastrous. The effects for Australia, I think, in the long term would be devastating.
Now, what happens to the conch, this symbol of civilization? What happens to it? What's the last sentence about it? It gets broken. Well, not just broken. Let's read that again. Let's read the sentence.
The conch exploded into 1,000 white fragments and caught and ceased to exist.
Right. It exploded, which is much more dramatic than broken, isn't it? Exploded is a much more dramatic word, so it exploded.
Oh, I think it'd be devastating in the school. We really do need that little bit extra. It's not much that you get. I think at the moment we've got 3 ESL teachers in the school, funded by the Commonwealth. We really desperately need those people.
That's a great pity because it's been a lot of years, a lot of trial and error, a lot of different approaches and different people working on it, and you're starting to see here some success, and it'd be a pity to lose that.
The last 3 words.
White fragments.
Cease to exist. What does that mean, cease to exist?
It's not going to exist anymore. The civilization has gone out of the country.
In the last year, the federal government has withdrawn free English lessons for new migrants.
What doesn't exist?
It has cut back free interpreter and translation services.
The law. So at this point in the story, what has happened on this island?
Everything's marking out.
There's no more law.
There's no more law and order. There's no more civilization. Why didn't Jack pick on Ralph? Why did he pick on Piggy?
He was like second best.
That's right.
He was always jealous.
That's right.
He was always there to take it out.
Are the very people now unlocking the benefits of our diverse society, and even the secrets of its main language, to be denied their own means of communication?
Well, I think it would be a disastrous thing for us to do because we have already got a demonstration of the success of the policies that we have pursued. We just need to think about international conflicts that have riven communities apart who are well represented in Australia and reflect on the fact that very few of those conflicts have actually been played out here. In other words, our society has the capacity to resolve the problems that in other places the same groups of people cannot resolve. And I just think that such an important demonstration of social cohesion in diversity really needs to be understood well by government.
4 or 5. Excuse me, can you watch the language, gentlemen? Thank you.
The matters that you're looking at are pretty important. And whilst many of the decisions that you as a family group will make in the next few weeks can be altered, to a large extent it's going to decide people's futures. If you're not in the top 70 in the fall, start and think realistically about what you will do in 1996. Because the chance of you being offered a position at a university is pretty slim. Let me put it another way. If you're not around the middle of English, if you don't expect to get a 3 in English and at least a 3 in intermediate maths, you probably won't get offered a university place. Facts of life. Languages are one of the best TER subjects possible.